From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Good Friday morning. It's 5:30. Welcome to Montana This Morning. I'm Victoria Hill. Thanks for kicking off the weekend with us.
And I'm Ed McIntosh, and the weekend's going to look a lot like the week did. Warmer than average temperatures, breezy at times, and still staying very dry. We'll start with the first interstate ICAM this morning at 33 degrees, a mild start, but there's the wind. It's the same story we've talked about so often during the week, where the temperatures are warmer than average, but we have the breezy conditions, especially from Livingston out towards Billings. And the temperatures in the 30s, anywhere from around Billings and Livingston all the way to Lewistown, Great Falls. How about 42 this morning in Cutbank, 33 in Havre. Once we get into the plains, the 20s to low 30s there. Jordan, you're still pretty warm at 34. 26 in both Miles City and Sheridan. 24 in Cody. Good morning to you guys. 35. I mentioned Livingston, where the winds are already gusting up. We're seeing sustained winds of 25 to 30 miles an hour along I-90 between Billings and Bozeman. But very light winds in western Montana, causing some problems with inversions setting up there. And that's also trapping some of the smoke just from people's chimneys close to the surface and causing air quality issues. Temperatures into the teens, 20s to 30s this morning. How about 40 up in Harleton? 43 in Big Timber was the last report, but 19 for you in Clark. Temperatures warming up to near 50 today. We could break into the low 50s with some sunshine by later in the afternoon. We'll tell you about when all of this will start to change, coming up with the forecast in a few minutes.
Man, talk about ruining a good thing. I love the smell of chimney, but if you have too much of it,
that's right.
Kind of like
traps everything, traps the cold and the smoke right down close to the ground.
It could get old very fast.
For sure.
Kind of like my first job serving ice cream. I used to love ice cream, and after that job, I was like, oh, no. All right, Ed, thank you so much for that update on the weather. I'll get on to the news.
Okay, thanks.
We begin this Friday with continuing coverage. We now know the name of the man shot several times on Monday night outside of a church in Billings. 30-year-old Manuel Martinez was left for dead after being shot several times in his torso. He was lying in the street on the 500 block of Broadwater Avenue when a passing vehicle ran him over. Police are still investigating and do not have a suspect in the shooting. They do not believe the driver who hit Martinez is involved in the crime. Crime in Billings is a problem only made worse by the pandemic. That's why city and county leaders met with state legislators last night to outline their priorities for public safety. They presented some eye-opening statistics, hoping something can be done to address the crime spike during this upcoming session in Helena.
We took a snapshot of a period of a year, and some of you may have even seen these figures. I think I shared them with Representative Usher and Representative Kelker at some point. But Yellowstone County got 181 violent or sex offenders paroled from the prison into their community. And in the same time frame, Gallatin County got 1. Missoula got 30. That tells me that our local criminal justice system, our parole department, our state parole workers here, because those numbers didn't change, they are getting overburdened.
The convening of Montana's 2021 legislature is just a month away, and its solid Republican majority is busy working on its priorities along with incoming Governor Greg Gianforte. This morning, MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison tells us about one of their plans that's coming out next week.
It's called the Montana Recovery Agenda, drawn up by a new free market think tank, the Frontier Institute, which is led by a former aide to Montana Congressman-elect Matt Rosendale. It calls for a conservative state budget, no surprise there, making regulatory reduction a requirement in state law, market-based healthcare reforms, and greater privacy for your personal digital info.
Of course, there are going to be bits and pieces of each of those plans that individuals might not agree with 100% of the whole thing. But I do think that the overall goal of it, protecting people's, personal rights, personal privacy, and reducing the expansion of government to the extent that government is being efficient with what we need it to do.
But while Republicans certainly want a conservative budget, Senate Majority Leader Kerry Smith of Billings says it's too early to say what that means in terms of spending levels or specific changes.
We can make ourselves more efficient. We want to make ourselves more efficient. Is that going to result in a decrease in spending over the prior biennium? We don't know that yet because we're just starting to get into the budget now.
Smith says he'll likely sponsor one of the healthcare proposals in the Institute's plan to authorize in law direct primary care clinics. These clinics bypass insurers, instead allowing patients to buy a membership for unlimited access to certain healthcare.
When you're looking at the high cost of healthcare, one of the really high costs is actually what we pay for in insurance. So if you take insurance out of the picture, and now you're dealing directly between the patient and the physician or the healthcare provider, you've eliminated the middleman.
Knudsen, the Speaker Pro Tem in the House, says he's interested in pushing for enhanced privacy protection of information held on personal cell phones.
Being able to make it very clear that you need a warrant to search through people's electronic data just as you would if you had to walk into their house and go through a filing cabinet.
GOP legislative leaders say they'll look at this plan and others and will be consulting with Governor-elect Gianforte and even minority Democrats on how they can advance an agenda to revitalize the state's economy. In the coming weeks, we'll be reporting on some of these other wish lists and proposals as they emerge. And next week, we'll be sitting down with Governor-elect Gianforte to talk about his game plan. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
The 2021 legislature is scheduled to convene on January 4th in Helena, although details of how it will operate in the pandemic and its overall schedule are still being discussed. Turning now to the latest on the pandemic, President-elect Joe Biden will call on the nation to wear masks for the first 100 days of his presidency. He says he thinks if everyone complies, the nation will see a significant drop in cases. The coronavirus pandemic is dominating his transition into the White House. Both Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris say they'll get a COVID-19 vaccination once one is approved and deemed safe. Today, Vice President Mike Pence is heading to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters in Atlanta, where he'll learn more about the COVID-19 vaccine progress. The pharmaceutical company Pfizer has said its first doses could be available as early as December 15th, and Moderna's vaccine is also set to roll out this month. The CDC wants healthcare workers and patients in long-term care to be the first to receive the vaccine, but much of that will be up to individual states. Vice President Pence is the head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. There have been more than 14 million confirmed coronavirus cases in the U.S. and over 276,000 COVID-19 deaths. CBS's Deborah Alfarone tells us how leaders across the country are implementing plans to slow the spread.
The post-Thanksgiving surge predicted by public health experts has arrived, with the coronavirus now spreading out of control in much of the U.S. More than 217,000 positive coronavirus tests were reported Thursday, shattering the previous single-day total set just a day earlier.
We don't want to scare people, but if you look at the numbers, we know that will almost certainly is going to result in a surge superimposed upon a surge.
Hospitals across the country say they're running out of beds.
It is part of the tsunami that we've been expecting and preparing for, knowing that the dark winter, as you've heard that phrase, is coming.
California Governor Gavin Newsom introduced regional stay-at-home orders. He believes statewide restrictions will be needed within days.
We are pursuant to the blueprint we put out some 14 or so weeks ago, pulling that emergency brake.
Newsom said stay-at-home orders will be posted in areas where intensive care units are nearly full.
We need to be serious about this virus. We need to take it very seriously.
The pandemic is growing worse, just as the first vaccines are on the horizon.
This is the weapon that is going to win the war.
States are now drafting plans to distribute those vaccines, but experts say they'll arrive too late to stop the outbreak already underway. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
President-elect Biden says he has asked infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci to serve as one of his administration's chief medical advisors. Here in the Treasure State, unemployed Montanans are getting a boost during the holiday season. $200 extra will be given to every person collecting benefits because of COVID-19 disruptions. The additional payments come from leftover CARES Act funding that the state has to spend before the end of the year. Some fear these benefits and similar ones will run out in 2021. As Congress still hasn't passed a new stimulus bill. But Montana Senator Steve Daines says optimism is growing for a new bipartisan proposal.
You're going to see a lot of similar pieces that we saw from that March care package. I think the bottom line is this. We're going to take what worked in March and continue to invest there. What didn't work, we won't. In terms of looking at another stimulus check, that's something right now that both sides are looking at. I would guess that any package that passes Congress will also include some kind of stimulus check.
Dane says the package could also include more funding for small businesses and schools, as well as PPE, money for hospitals, clinics, and the Postal Service. Also making headlines this morning, President Trump had a tense meeting with Attorney General William Barr this week. Sources tell CBS News Barr was seen at the White House for more than 2 hours on Tuesday. The president is said to be angry the Attorney General publicly contradicted his election fraud claims. Barr said the Justice Department has seen no evidence that could overturn the election. With less than 50 days until Biden's inauguration, President Trump has yet to concede defeat. Meanwhile, the president continues to raise money despite the campaign being over. His political operation has taken in more than $207 million since Election Day. After losing the election, the campaign sent out hundreds of emails and text messages asking supporters for money. Many of the appeals pointed to the president's official election defense fund, but most of the money does not go to fund recounts. Instead, a majority went to a new PAC the president recently established.